Okay, we're going to get started. Thanks everybody for joining for our webinar today. Our session is on building great SharePoint dashboards. I know this is something that just about everybody cares about in SharePoint. There's a lot of ideas on this, and looking forward to sharing some tips and tricks on things you can do to make your SharePoint dashboards look good. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started with our presentation. Before I get into this, I do want to give some ground rules. You do want to put your questions into the chat interface, and we will be answering that questions towards the end of the presentation, so do please be sure to do that. After our presentation is over today, we will be loading this up to our website in our webinar section. So if for any reason you want to share that with anybody or view the presentation later, please just go to the Infowise site, and if you look in the webinar section, you can see a recording of this by the end of today. So I do want to also mention at the end of the presentation, we're going to give away a free Infowise shirt. They're really cool embroidered shirts, and everybody who has one loves it. So I hope you can stick around to the end so that you can have a chance to win that. Just to tell you a little bit about my background, I've for a long time been a Microsoft developer, and I began my programming career doing .NET web programming, and I do like to build solutions working within the Microsoft framework. I've been using Infowise for a little more than 4 years. I started as a customer of Infowise and really loved the product so much that I began to get to know the Infowise team, and now I have the opportunity to work with them, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share information about the product and to show folks who don't have those tools, just how great they are and what you can do in terms of using those in solutions. Just to tell you about our team, we really love to make things easy in SharePoint. We have fun helping in terms of figuring out solutions, and we're always looking to improve our product. Just to tell you very briefly about Ultimate Forms, that's a full form solution that is available for SharePoint on-premise or Office 365. These tools deploy completely inside of the SharePoint user interface. There's nothing external you have to use, and it really is a comprehensive suite of tools that we provide. Okay, so let's talk about SharePoint dashboards, the problems that we have with them. So very much SharePoint is a blank slate. We start out and there's sort of an empty canvas, and for many SharePoint users, they don't really know what to do with that. It's not clear when you start using SharePoint how you're supposed to set things up to make things look nice. Another issue is just that kind of every page looks the same in SharePoint, and that's bad because it creates a confusing navigation experience for users, and it's very easy to get mixed up and not know really where you are. Okay. A lot of SharePoint dashboards really fail to have very many, if any at all, visual elements, and that's really a bad story. What we want to talk about today is ways to bring in visual elements and build something that's interesting to look at and dynamic. A lot of times the navigation really isn't great. Of course, we've always got a global navigation at the top, and you have your site navigation on the side. And really, if we're not doing anything more than that for our users, again, we're kind of setting up for an experience where every page looks just the same as another. So we want to think about that a little bit and talk about ways that we can provide, a better navigation that our users are going to like. Oftentimes in SharePoint, really the information is just plain boring to look at, and it really doesn't have to be that way. Certainly we're dealing with business information, and typically people want to be conventional, but there are ways to include visual elements and still conform to business requirements. And we do want our information to be changing. In a lot of cases in pages in SharePoint, you have static information on the page, and just in general when we're on the web, if the information doesn't change on a page, pretty soon we're never going to go back to it again. Okay, so here we're looking at a very familiar page to anybody who's SharePoint very much at all, and this is the case for on-prem or Office 365. This is just the kind of most typical SharePoint view. SharePoint's all about lists of data, and here we go. We're just looking at a list on the page and lots of white and gray. Just really nothing very interesting at all about the page we're looking at here. Unfortunately, this is kind of the story for a lot of SharePoint. So as I mentioned, we just have this issue where our dashboards even all tend to look the same, and that's just not exciting in general for our audience, and we really want to strive to do something different. Okay, so I think we all have a pretty good idea of some of the problems with SharePoint dashboards and SharePoint in general in terms of look and feel. So let's start to think more towards the direction of what are good solutions to that. What's a recipe for success as you're considering a good strategy to have good SharePoint dashboards that are interesting to look at? Well, the first thing I want to tell you is it would be a huge mistake to try to pack everything into one view. I think there is a tendency sometimes where we think that we want to have kind of this one key page which handles everything, and really that's impossible to do. So I kind of show a picture of the Swiss Army knife. This is kind of my idea of what some people think you should do with the page. We don't want to do that. It's overwhelming to users. We want to keep things clean and simple and easy for our users to understand. All right, so here's the first strategy which I strongly recommend. In the home page of your site where your tool or information is located, I would strongly recommend that you create a dashboard of dashboards. What I mean is we know that we need multiple dashboards. We're not just going to have one key dashboard. There's just no way that we can get all our key functionality into that. Instead, we really just want kind of a jump-off point. I mentioned to you that the global navigation at the top and the site navigation on the side, it's pretty boring to look at. It's not eye-catching at all. It really doesn't draw in our users. You know, in the age of tablets and smartphones, really what we like to do is tap on pictures, and we like icons and buttons and things like that. So what I'm showing you here is sort of an idea of a tile-style navigation that you could have on a home page. Now you have to have some consideration of how many dashboards you might like. In my experience, I've found that you know, these 8 tiles like you see here, it's a good sweet spot, and in general that gives you a good opportunity to jump off into you know, different key dashboards for your site. Now the good news with that is that's really easy to set up. So regardless of which tools you have set up in your SharePoint environment, really everybody can take advantage of this approach. In SharePoint, you have a summary links web part. Typically, people aren't using this with the images, and that's where you want to do something different. So I'm just going to talk to you briefly about that. So in the summary links web part, of course, you can load images. My recommendation is to use tile images with a height of 150 pixel and width of 250 pixel to get this kind of look. You want to set up 4 columns to get this kind of view. You would hide the column headers, and then there's the style option, which is image on top center. I also would recommend adding in a little bit of CSS so you can get hover styling, that type of thing. But really this is a kind of navigation that, in my experience, you know, any user is going to like. You can put in whatever images you want for the tiles, but it just keeps things simple. Very easy to absorb the concept of 8 buttons that jump off to you know, different dashboards. Okay, in terms of overall page setup, whether it's a dashboard or any page in SharePoint, I recommend that you strive for a 50-50 split. If, where possible, try to have half of the content represented by images, whether those are charts or icons or a banner, and maybe half of it lists. Don't make the mistake of what we saw earlier, just dumping your users onto a screen with a long list of records. It's sort of the wall of text, as I refer to it. Nobody likes to look at that. Look for a balance on all your pages. Okay, in the list view itself, inevitably we're going to be looking at list views in SharePoint. That's what SharePoint is at its heart. It's a whole bunch of lists. Instead of just having textual information, what we really want are some icons, especially for the SharePoint choice fields. What you're seeing on this screen are some example icons that you can have, and especially status or KPI indicators, things of that nature. We want to see flags and indicators that help us very quickly understand, what's in a good state or a bad state, on time, overtime, whatever the case may be. In the Infowise tools, this is incredibly easy to set up. You can take any choice field and just pick icons. As you see here, all of the ones that you saw on the previous screen, you can pick from that. And we just simply map it to what we're doing. So you can see I've got arrows for in progress. I could have a check mark for submitted. Really anything that I want. There's no complexity to this whatsoever. I can tell you that as a SharePoint developer that in almost every solution that I provide in SharePoint to anyone, I inevitably use an Infowise color choice field instead of the choice field, just because it expands the possibilities and it's going to make the dashboards look so much nicer. Another thing we want to do is we want to have indicators. People like gauges, bars, progress. These concepts are things that people like to see based on visual representations, not by just reading a number like 57%. So what you see in this view, we see some concepts like a priority indicator where I've got a nice eye-catching 1 for priority 1. We've got different indicators for status. The progress bar that you see there, that's keying off a number value in the list, and that fills up according to that record getting updated. So this is going to be a lot better for me to look at as a user than just straight text values. Also, you see a signature field, that's an Infowise type of field, and the on-time indicator on the right. So this is what we want to strive for. We don't just want a wall of gray text. We really want to have icon and progress indicators in those views. Okay. With Infowise, just like with the color choice, it's very simple. I can just go into this setup and I basically just map that over. So what it's going to want to know is which field it's looking to. So it's looking for a number value. I'm showing an example where I want to see out of 40 hours in a week how much time has been done. And also what's cool is I can actually have the progress bar change color. So if it's low or high, I could make it change, blue, green, orange, red. I could have the bar even be dynamic in terms of what color it is as it's filling up. I mentioned we really don't want to overwhelm users with a bunch of information. What we really want in just about any dashboard is a drill down type of functionality. So rather than just have a straight list set up, only really want to show the detail information for specific records if users click on this. So there's a couple ways to do drill down functionality. What I'm showing here is a setup with Infowise where you can have an associated items list and create a many-to-one relationship between records. This is showing basically a vendor invoicing system. So you have vendors which may have multiple invoices, and then within that you can have child records there. So this kind of expanding, collapsing functionality, this is good. I don't want to show the user information unless they specifically want the detail at that time. And that lets me keep a nice, clean, simple dashboard, and they can just drill down for the detail they want. Okay, so with Infowise, as I mentioned, we have associated items lists that you can set up in fields. So basically, in your form view, you can set up multiple records. You could have multiple tasks for a project, for example, and that is just a very straightforward setup and just something that you really can't do at all with SharePoint out of the box. Naturally, we want to include charts. That's always going to be a big part of the story in terms of including visual elements for dashboards. There's different ways to do that. With Infowise, we do include charting functionality right from within your SharePoint interface, and you can do 35 different types of charts with that, and there are a lot of configuration options in terms of adjusting the font, background colors, all of that type of thing. So you do have a charting solution built in with those Infowise tools. We also have a technology partner that we work with, COLLABION Charting. If you're looking for a really advanced, dedicated charting solution, this fits extremely well with Infowise. I use these solutions together, and they really help you to accomplish goals as far as your visual interface. I mentioned drill down. With that COLLABION charting, you can click into the chart and actually get detailed information on charting. So that's a really neat tool that you can look at if you really want to be even a little bit more advanced past your Infowise tools. On those dashboards that have a lot of heavy traffic, I really encourage you to use what I would refer to as a what's new web part. It's not actually a SharePoint web part, it's just sort of the term that I use. But the idea is you really want to keep your users aware of what's changed, because that may not be obvious to them. So to do this type of functionality, really you just need to create a custom list in your SharePoint site and create some fields for it to hold some information, like a URL to link off to a page. Maybe you have like a critical indicator, that type of thing. And then on your dashboard page, what you could use is just basically, you know, a filtered list view to do that. You would want to do some styling there. You notice I've got the green banner, so it helps to add a little bit of CSS to make that look attractive. But especially in those high traffic areas, consider using that real estate, especially below the site navigation, to have a what's new web part. You certainly should provide information which is context specific to your user. SharePoint gives you a really nice functionality for that. In the list views, you can use the me parameter and do filters according to that. So I'm showing an example where it's a SharePoint projects list where there are thousands of records, but this is a filtered view where it's only going to show ones where requester is equal to me and buyer is equal to me. This is good. Your users don't want to be paging through information. Just about any kind of tools you want to do, you want this concept, the concept of a My Records dashboard. So be sure that you include that as one of the types of dashboards in your solution. A lot of SharePoint sites really neglect to use banners at all. I think a lot of us are so functionality oriented, we're so focused on the business process, we forget that this really creates, as I mentioned, kind of a balanced interface. Because people aren't especially adept, especially the business users, at going and locating banner images, my recommendation is to actually create a full banner image library in your SharePoint environment so that these banner images are at the ready. If you do that, it makes it very simple for your users to just pick from those library of images, and then it's not an ordeal to pick a banner. If you don't have this, a lot of times this just gets neglected. It really could be any kind of banners. I mean, if you're not sure what to do, even kind of nature images like sky or mountains, that type of thing would work just fine. Same thing with those tiles I showed you earlier. Again, some of those business users, they're going to not necessarily be inclined to go out to some site searching for images for those tiles. So, really, consider helping them out a little bit. It's not very hard to just create a library of these tile images. Build up a library, make that accessible to everybody in your SharePoint environment, and then that way you can just browse to these tiles and just pick them out when you want to do a tile navigation dashboard. You don't have to go through the process of creating those tiles every time. Again, I mentioned a good size I've found is that 250 pixel by 150 pixel. The group by functionality in SharePoint is real handy. I showed you the drill down functionality with Infowise. You can also use a two-level group by setting, so you can do those accordion style views where you can expand and collapse. Another thing that helps is to include a custom filter control at the top of your dashboards to allow users to filter to specific information. And Infowise does include custom filter and advanced search controls that give you that extra functionality so users can get just to the specific information that they want. Don't neglect calendars. The SharePoint calendar is quite boring and doesn't really have much options to it. For that reason, really most people just don't use it hardly at all. Infowise does include a calendar component in their tools, and I encourage you to use that. One thing that's neat especially is it includes a Gantt view of records. So a calendar dashboard is also an important one, especially in a system that's very date specific. This is a view of your data that your users would definitely appreciate. All right, so here's a few sample dashboards. This is a navigation hub style dashboard with accordion sections. This is something that would need some scripting. You can have this driven by a SharePoint list. My recommendation would be to use jQuery, and basically what we're looking for is, a 3 or 4 level expanding and collapsing nodes. With one of my customers, this really is a critical page for them, and it's probably the most used page for an entire division within a company. So having a hub jump-off spot is a good story. So again, kind of showing you the concept of thinking outside of the global navigation and site navigation. Here's another dashboard. This is just using the summary links web part, but also we're adding some styling. So notice that the bullets look a little bit different. You might add a little icon in there for new, that type of thing. And then you see there's a banner at the top of this page. This page would be pretty blah to look at if we didn't have a banner up there. So don't forget to include that. Here's a dashboard that has kind of a scrolling marquee at the top. There's those familiar tile style navigation. We've got a chart at the bottom. So we've kind of got a mix of content. The chart is going to update dynamically based on list information. So I mentioned we don't want things to be static, and the chart helps to make sure that doesn't happen. There's another tile style navigation. Notice we've got some styling across the top and the side instead of just using that default SharePoint. Really with just a little bit of CSS adjustments, we can do some things to make that navigation a whole lot more attractive and easier to read. The tiles really can just go down the page as much as you want, so that's just according to your taste. It doesn't have to just be eight tiles there. Here's an example of a timesheets view. So we've got the banner at the top. Notice we've got the progress bars that are changing color according to how far full they are, and it is using that drill down type of functionality. So rather than just dumping out all of the time entries across all the timesheets, I can drill down to it. It's using the SharePoint group by settings. So this is what you want to do. We're not trying to give a mountain of information to the user all at once. Here's just a simple chart. Charts look nice if they're just set up on a page on their own. In general, I recommend don't try to cram charts onto pages with lists. It's just too much at once. Instead, use that navigation to make a real simple way to get to those charts. Okay, so let's talk about how you're going through this process, how you might use Infowise tools to do that. With out-of-the-box SharePoint, no charting whatsoever. You have to look outside of it. Infowise does allow you to do that from in the Infowise interface. So we've got lots of information and examples how to do that. No options for icons at all with SharePoint. With Infowise, I showed you, basically it's 2 or 3 mouse clicks to just assign an icon to those fields. So really just within a minute or two, you completely change the look of your list dashboard. No indicators at all in out-of-the-box SharePoint. I showed you those progress bar, KPI flags, and even countdown indicators make a tremendous difference in terms of how your dashboards will look. The calendar in SharePoint, very few options or configuration. We've got the Gantt view calendar as well as a lot of flexibility in terms of those views in Infowise. No parent-child associated items list are set up for that with SharePoint out of the box. Infowise, of course, I mentioned we have that. There is some search and filter capability in SharePoint, but it's difficult to work with, not a lot of flexibility. We have advanced controls for that, easy to use, easy to set up, and good to include in your dashboards. And then something we didn't look at today, because we're talking about dashboards, the actual customization of the forms themselves. Naturally, the Infowise Ultimate Forms has many, many features as it relates to customizing that. So if you are looking to do a custom form experience for your users, really this is going to be the best tool for you to do that. Okay, so just briefly I want to talk to you about how do you make things with Infowise. It's really easy to do. You basically just go through the steps you see on the screen. Naturally, everything starts with creating your SharePoint list. We do give a tabbed interface in our forms. You have controls for field security, and you can do advanced validation and business logic. It really fits hand in hand with dashboards. We also want to make our email templates look really nice, and we want to be able to have nice, attractive print output, and those capabilities are also included in the Infowise product. So there's a real straightforward process to building solutions. I did want to mention we really share a philosophy with one of our technology partners, who is COLLABION, and we both really strongly believe that visualizing data is really where the focus should be. These two products work great together. I wish I could have them both in every SharePoint environment I work in. Really, with both of these, they're very easy to use. It's all with a visual interface and configuration. There's no programming or coding involved. And with both products, you can install free demos that have full functionality. They're not limited in any way. If you didn't happen to catch our presentation last month, we did a similar topic, which is about making great-looking forms. I hope you'll go out to the Infowise site and look for that if you didn't happen to catch the presentation. Really, it fits hand in hand with the presentation that we had today talking about dashboards. Lots more features than we can cover in our webinar today. I did want to emphasize that it is full functionality both for on-premise and Office 365 with no limitations. I mentioned there's custom calendars where you can fully customize the actual form views, advanced search functionality. There's a signature field for do sign-off, and also those associated items lists. Okay, what's next? You guys hopefully have some curiosity and interest in using some of these tools, and I want to kind of tell you, what do you need to do to check this out and try this, because that's really the next thing to do. Okay, so let me actually jump into SharePoint, and we'll go ahead and talk about that a little bit. Okay, so here's my SharePoint site. I just want to show you real quick how you get into the interface. Here's my tiles. Notice I've got a hover style when I hover over those tiles. So with Infowise, you just go to the List tab in the ribbon toolbar, click on the design icon, and this is your hub for everything Infowise. So I'll just show you real quick, just to do a color choice field, for example. All I really have to do is select the field, and then I can pick any icons I want. I showed you all those icons in my presentation. It's very simple. I just tell it what I want, click Update, Close, and then back to my site, and it really takes just like that, 10 seconds. Okay, so as far as what you guys need to do, if you want to try our product, you just need to go into our website. If you click on the Ultimate Forms link and just select on-premise or Office 365, the on-premise installation is just a simple wizard-based installation. If you just get in touch with us, we'll provide the download for you there. For Office 365, it is an app installation. So all the steps and instructions are there for you. Really, you can go through this all in about 10 minutes and you'll be up and running to use Infowise. And as I mentioned, it's going to be full functionality. I did want to tell you guys that with our product purchase, we do actually provide 2 hours of training to you with any kind of product purchase you do with us. And we're actually going to walk you through starting from nothing, how to build a help desk solution in your environment as an example. And we walk through all the key Infowise functionality. So there's lots of great training information to show you just what to do. Outside of that, we've got tutorials on our website, and there's examples and YouTube videos that show you how to use all of those features so you can build those great dashboards like we saw in our presentation. Okay, so we are going to kind of move to our Q&A section. Before I get right into that, I do want to mention that we're going to be at SP TechCon in DC in November. If you're planning to go to that show, please stop by and say hi at our booth. And also, we'll be at SharePoint Fest in Chicago in December. So if you're attending one of those two shows, we'd certainly like to hear about the projects you guys are working on and see what we can do to help you with Infowise solutions. We do include unlimited support with our product license. And then, as I mentioned, we have additional training. If you are a group that really emphasizes training, we actually have personalized training offerings where we'll do an in-depth session with lab work. You can find out more about that in our training section on our site. If you want us to schedule a demo with your organization, we'd be very interested to do that. please send us an email or make a note in the chat. Our email, if you'd like to get a demo, is sales@infowisesolutions.com. We'll do another presentation next month. We do these each month, so we'd be happy to have you again. And before I take questions, let me go ahead and do a shirt giveaway. If you guys are interested in a shirt, just enter a number for me, 1 to 100, in the message interface in the side there, and we'll draw for that in a second. And I'll go ahead and look for, let's see. Okay, we've got a winner for the shirt, so you can stop entering numbers. I've got a million numbers in my interface. Our winner is Tony Pellegrini. Hope I said your name right, Tony. Go ahead and send me an email, Tony, to willc@infowisesolutions.com. I want to get you set up with your shirt. Okay, let me read through some of the questions we had and make sure we get you guys set up there. Okay, modern layout came up. We're getting ready for that. Of course, Microsoft's still making adjustments and getting ready to some changes to the UI and SharePoint, particularly SharePoint Online. So we're fully aware of that, preparing our product, and it naturally will be fully functional with that. So you won't have any problems with that. How long does it take to learn? This came from Karen. Karen, this product is great to learn. The thing that's awesome is it's a no-code solution. So you don't have to do any programming. You don't have to use external tools like SharePoint Designer. And with the Kickstart training that comes with every product purchase, we'll have you up and running, really right out of the gate. It's awesome for SharePoint power users. You do not have to be a developer. So you should be able to start using this product immediately. Pricing for Office 365, basically for on-prem, it's based on your web front ends. For Office 365, it's based on a range for number of users. So you can kind of look in there. There's a schedule grid that'll show you that. From my perspective, it is an unbelievable value, especially in SharePoint Online, what you get for what you pay for that license. So it's based on total number of users, and you pay by that range, but you can look on our website for that. Okay, I think that's about all we have for today. I really appreciate everybody joining our session. As I mentioned, I'm going to post the recording of our webinar to our website later. I hope I gave you some ideas of things you can start to do in your SharePoint dashboards, and if you haven't used it already, I hope you'll go ahead and install the Infowise product so you can start to experiment and see how you can include that functionality to really build these dynamic and interesting dashboards. Thanks for your time, everybody, and we'll catch you next month in our next webinar.